Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have some terrifying Dogman encounters. I have a very terrifying subscriber submission. Before we get into those, a couple links I'd like to share. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch store to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to those are in the description below. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook version. Written by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. It's available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes. The links to those are in the description as well. Now, I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? Today's first encounter. My brother and I saw something that I discovered years later to be a popular myth in northern Michigan. When we were teenagers, we took a trip with my cousin and her family to their cabin in Gaylord, Michigan. It was a very rustic cabin that's been in her husband's family for generations. Nobody, nothing around for several miles, very thick woods, breathtakingly beautiful. There's no road that goes to the cabin, and there's no driveway or path. You literally follow a map and drive off into the woods until you find it. My cousin's husband mentioned that past generations had built other, smaller cabins nearby, and would write journal entries about their experiences. Some of the entries date back to the early 1900s. Thinking that was the coolest thing ever, we grabbed protection on the chance that we ran into a bear or something, a flashlight, because it was getting late, and made our way into the woods. We did not intend to be out long, mostly just planning a destination for the next day's adventure. When we found one of the cabins, maybe a 20-minute walk from the home cabin, we decided to take a break and see what was inside. Neither of us were aware of how quickly it gets dark when you are in the woods that thick, and the next thing we knew, it was pitch black outside. We panicked a bit because these are not woods that you want to be in at night, and without the light of day, we had no idea how to get back. Not the best decision-making on anyone's part, but hey, what can you do now? We remembered what we were told: make enough noise, and if there are any dangerous animals nearby, they will likely get scared and go somewhere else. The predators in the area aren't exactly hungry, so we should be fine. We remembered this too late because the next thing we know, there's a pair of glowing yellow eyes off in the distance, moving very slowly towards us. A large white silhouette of a wolf comes into view with those yellow eyes. As soon as I can say, "Oh shit, is that a fucking wolf?" about a dozen more pairs of yellow eyes appeared. We had been joined by the entire pack of wolves, just staring at us. To paint a picture, the cabin is about the size of a small RV, and the entire front side of it is plexiglass window. The door was just a screen. We knew that we were supposed to make enough noise to keep predators away from us. We had no idea what to do if we found ourselves in the middle of a wolf's den with all eyes on us. Both terrified and in total awe, we just froze. We heard another wolf pack howling a few miles behind us, and then another one right off to the right. This made us even more terrified because we were told that wolf packs typically avoid each other's territories. So what were they doing so close? We are both completely aware that they could just sounded closer than they were, but in the moment they literally sounded like they were right there. We couldn't tell if minutes were passing or hours. We were just frozen, hoping that my cousin's husband wasn't going to stumble into this den looking for us. The wolves started to lie down one by one. Every now and then, we'd see a pair of eyes pop up, but mostly they had stopped caring that we were there. That's when it happened. Much like the first wolf that we saw, a pair of yellow eyes was approaching from the distance, except this time, the silhouette was huge and moved like a ghost. My brother grabbed my arm tightly, I think because he was trying not to piss his pants. I just about did when I saw it as well. Whatever was walking toward us was not like the other wolves at all. The only way that I could describe what I was seeing is to compare it to Professor Lupin from Harry Potter. It looked like a fucking werewolf, but on all fours. It had a humped back and its shoulders were higher than what a canine normally looks like. It moved its way around the sleeping wolves, toward the cabin, towards us. I'm doing everything in my mind to tell myself that it was just a weird-looking wolf. Maybe some sort of deformity. Or that maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me in the moonlight. There is no way that what I think I'm seeing is actually there. That was when it stood up, hunched over and slowly walking up the steps to the cabin door. Remember, the cabin door is just a screen. Instead of opening it, it just hunched over and sat down on the porch. I'll never forget the way it was breathing. Heaving is more like it. Its entire body rocked back and forth with every inhale-exhale while it looked over the sleeping wolves. I whispered to my brother, "What the fuck is that?" And it started to moan and then growl, stood back up and walked to the other side of the porch, got back on all fours, crawled down the steps the way the person would if they were on all fours, and began walking circles around the cabin before coming back to the steps and rocking, heaving at the foot of the steps, again facing the wolves. Eventually it got up and walked to the back of the cabin. I've never been so scared in my life. What the hell was that thing? We sat there frozen in absolute silence until the sun came up. I'm not sure that I even blinked once, but we never saw the wolves get up and leave. When the sun started to peer through the tree canopy, the whole area was clear. It was only us. Wolves are majestic creatures. It was impressive to witness just how stealthy they can be. When we got back to the home cabin, we assured our panicking cousin that we were fine. But when we told her what we had just experienced, her husband laughed at us. He had been going to this cabin for his entire life, and he has never seen a wolf come this close, let alone an entire pack. He seemed not to realize that he and his friends partying out there is a bit more deterrent than my brother and I sitting quietly. He walked away from us. When we told him, we heard multiple packs. We decided not to mention Professor Lupin. If he thought we were imagining wolves, what would be the point of telling him we were stalked by a mutant one? Neither of us are the type of people to believe in werewolves or things like that, and still don't. But we know what we saw was unbelievable. Definitely not an animal that I've ever known to exist. Fast forward 13 years later now, I'm watching a documentary on legends of different creatures and learning more about the Michigan Dogman. Ridiculous name. The most ridiculous and unbelievable stories like mine. I do a little more research and find that there are a lot of people from northern Michigan with a very similar story. The creature that these people are describing is almost exactly what we experienced. A human-like creature with the head of a dog. The reports of this creature are mostly centered around northern Lower Peninsula, Michigan, where you'll find Gaylord. I'm not the type to jump to believing things like this. All I know is that the wolf looked mutated, and it stood up and walked up those steps. My brother and I have always shared this. Do you remember the time in Gaylord that people thought we were exaggerating about? Mostly, we leave out the oddity because, besides the terror, this was the coolest thing I've ever experienced. It's just a cool story to share. Learning that this monster-like thing that we saw is actually a thing has rocked me to the core. What the hell did we see that night? Today's second part of the upload. I was around 7 or 8 years old. I took dance classes that sometimes ran into early night. My parents had picked me up, and we were going 60 to 70 miles an hour on the highway in my dad's truck. Not many cars were on the road. I was in the back seat, right side, watching the shadows from the streetlights. I was bored and counting how many street lamps there were based on their shadow, since the lamps were on the left side. After one lamp, a shadow appeared of a dog-like creature on all fours. It had dog-like ears, but almost looked like what a person would look like on all fours. I remember being scared, as it looked quite large, and I was worried because I didn't know how it was keeping up with us. I tried looking at it directly by looking through the back window, but the bed of the truck blocked everything. It must have been really close. I'm not sure why I didn't tell my parents. I think it was because I didn't want to take my eyes off of it. Anyway, I could see its running shadow pass by every lamppost shadow, until at one point it was like it ran behind a lamppost and vanished. Today's third part of the upload. As many of you might already know, many Navajo people, including my own family, are very reluctant to speak about skinwalkers, because it is believed that it will attract their attention. Well, I, however, grew up away from the Navajo Nation, and was very naive about the subject. When it came to skinwalkers, I was an absolute skeptic. My mom used to tell me a story of how back in the 80s, when she lived with her siblings and my grandparents, still in Shiprock, but the southern outskirts, about how she and my aunt saw a skinwalker just outside their driveway under a streetlight. She described it as a black dog with dirty fur and twisted noodle-like front leg, and these unnatural eyes with a soft, burnt orange glow. Me, being my own closed-minded self, doubted every word, but I never said my doubts aloud. But these doubts totally changed last year when I went to my grandparents' house last October. Me and my family had just finished scourging the carnival at the Navajo National Fair and called it a night. The house was close enough where we could walk home in just about 10 minutes, so we did. When we got there, it was about 9 at night, where we stayed up until about 2, catching up on family affairs and local news. It was during that time that I decided to open my mouth and blurt out the question, "Hey, are skinwalkers real, guys?" I asked. "You shouldn't be speaking about that," my grandma said, with almost a disturbed yell in her voice. So she and my grandfather both decide to go to bed after being scolded by my mom. One of my aunt chimes in with a very cautious tone. "They are real, all right. Had a few start screaming outside of my trailer in Farmington just a few nights ago. Your cousin had nightmares the whole night and woke up crying in the morning." Not wanting to push the discomfort any further, we all decided to go to bed. Now the trailer home is pretty old, and it was a really nice night, so we slept with the windows open with the screens to prevent bugs from coming in. Everyone had drifted off to sleep except me, because my mind was still going a million miles a minute about skinwalkers and wondering if I'd ever encounter one while out on the reservation. As a kid, I was told it's taboo to think about skinwalkers because it can still call their attention. That's when the shit hit the fan. Just as I was settling and finally getting relaxed to sleep, I started to hear something moving outside. I got up from the couch and started to wander over to the kitchen window. In the trailer, all of the rooms have the lights out, so the only visible light that can be seen is from the porch light out front. I was thankful for this because I told myself if it really was a skinwalker outside, then hopefully it wouldn't notice me seeing it. So I muster up the courage to take a quick scan of the outside. From the porch light, all I can see is the dusty ground and the vehicles that my family drove, along with some old metal trash cans that stood beside the road. Looking for about a good 5 seconds, I wasn't able to see anything, so I was getting ready to turn around and walk back to bed, thinking that it was just a stray cat or something. Only have taken a few steps, I hear what sounded like a distorted scream coming from outside, but definitely close. Fear rising, I look outside again, and there I see it. A coyote-like figure was staring at my direction from behind the cars, just outside of reach of the porch light. Only it looked awfully wrong and gave off an evil vibe just from seeing it. It was gray with very disheveled hair, and a horrific orange-red soft glow came from its eyes. I noped the hell out and ran back to the bedroom. It was at this moment I had begun to also notice an awful stench in the air that smelled like rotting meat. I started to try to wake up my mom, who was like, "Oh my God, it's almost 3 a.m., what do you want?" I immediately began in a shaking voice, "There's something scary outside." Then she said, now annoyed because I woke her up, "Oh, it's probably a stray animal or something. It's the res. Animals wander all the time at night." She obviously wasn't getting the drift of what I was saying, so I screamed, "There's some Blair Witch Project shit going on outside, Mom." That got her attention. "What? What the hell are you talking about?" she said. Then we heard it. The thing outside started making more of its dreadful-like screaming, and started what sounded like thrashing outside on the ground. Hear that? That's what I'm talking about. So both her and I got back up and looked outside the window, and the coyote thing was making its way to the door. It walked with an odd limp and dragged its back right leg as if it was handicapped. We could hear it start to scratch against the door and make this odd, muffled moan sound. My mom went and got my dad, and they both started shouting in Navajo, all sorts of words, telling the thing to go away and saying it was not welcome here. Well, all this commotion was enough to get the rest of the trailer up as they came out into the hallway. The only thing my mom did was turn to them and said, "Skinwalker," while proceeding to point at the door. Noises still happening. Apparently, they already knew exactly what to do as my grandfather got his handgun from the drawer and a bag of ashes. He coated a few bullets and loaded them into the gun and went straight for the door. Yelling out more Navajo that was too fast for me to comprehend, he swung open the door and fired twice. Nothing. The thing managed to escape before my grandpa could put a bullet in it. "That's the fastest one I've ever seen," said my grandpa. Next thing you know, my aunts and my parents are freaking out about what had just happened, saying stuff like, "What if it comes back tomorrow?" And, "It saw us. Does that mean we're targets now?" Afterward, my grandparents calmed everyone down, myself included, saying we'll be fine. And we all went to bed around 3-ish. So morning comes, and my grandparents call one of their neighbors and explain to them what had happened. Apparently, one of them was a medicine man who used to partake in the Yabi Chi Navajo ceremony used for healing and curing sickness, and came over to bless each family member and the grounds outside. Today's fourth part of the upload. I'm sharing this story today for 3 reasons. This weekend is the annual celebration of the Beast of Bladenboro, called Beast Fest. Inside Travel magazine put out a list of the scariest urban legends of every state and named the Beast as the scariest urban legend in North Carolina. I'm telling you this story Monday night at my weekly Toastmasters meeting, and I thought I might as well write up about it while I'm working on it. I grew up in a very small town of Bladenboro, North Carolina. When I say small, I mean small. Population now is just over 1,600. At the time of this story, it was just 1,000. We literally only have one stoplight in the whole town, so imagine my surprise when I saw that my little hole-in-the-wall town was represented all of North Carolina with the spookiest urban legend. I would like to pose, however, that the beast isn't an urban legend at all. It all started the last few days of 1953, when in the neighboring town of Clarkton, a man witnessed a large animal killing a dog. He described the beast as sleek, black, about 5 feet long. 2 days later, 2 more dogs in Bladenboro were found dead. The dogs were torn into ribbons and crushed. Then, on New Year's Day, another 2 dogs, and the next day another, and the next day 2 more. All of them had their skulls crushed and were drained of blood. The entire town of Bladenboro was gripped with fear. Eyewitnesses began to come forward describing the beast as either a cat or bear-like. Then a young mother stepped out onto her porch to investigate what sounded like a whimpering dog, and she saw the beast, which turned from the dog and began to charge towards her. She screamed, and the beast turned and disappeared into the woods. Many people came forward, claiming to have seen this beast, and by all accounts, it was a large 100-pound or more cat-like creature that left large cat-like paw prints and made cries that sounded like a human baby or a panther. The word about this vicious vampire beast spread far and wide, attracting tourists and hunters, including big game hunters from all over the country into a small town. Over 1,000 hunters with more than 50 packs of trained hunting dogs descended into the swamps. This hunt culminated in the death of 2 bobcats. One was shot by my great-granduncle, Barry Lewis, who also happens to be involved in another mystery, and the third cat with a leopard-like spots that stood about 2 feet high. The truth is that all 3 of these cats were much smaller than the beast was described to be, and the likelihood that a 40-pound bobcat was taking down larger dogs is hard to believe. But the mayor of the town, Woodrow Fussell, was worried about the number of hunters that were in the swamps at night hunting the beast, afraid that with so many people running around with guns that someone was going to get shot. He claimed one of the bobcats as the beast and calmed the fears of the citizens, and to call the end of the hunting. However, according to witnesses alive at the time, not reported in any newspapers that I could find, after the death of the 3 cats, there was also a goat and a calf that were attacked and killed in the same manner. But the beast must not have been a fan of so many people in the swamps and the woodlands, and soon disappeared, never to haunt Bladenboro again. The whole affair only lasted a couple weeks. But was he really gone for good? Wiki about the beast of Bladenboro. In 2007, in Bolivia, North Carolina, an hour southeast of Bladenboro, 3 pit bulls were attacked in a very similar manner. Their necks were bitten and broken, and their bodies were drained of blood. And then, over 200 miles away, in Lexington and Greensboro, North Carolina, more attacks. This time, goats were the victims. But they were all killed in the same way. These new attacks were featured on the History Channel Monster Quest Season 2, Episode 2, Vampire Beast. And then, within the past 2 years, I've seen what could have been the beast myself. Both times it was just after dark. I was driving home. The creature was sitting at the opening of a game trail just beside a road. The first time I drove by wondering if it was a large black dog, but knew that something was off about it. Being a dog, I volunteer with the Humane Society in my area, and I'm around dogs all the time. The second time, I turned around and watched as it slinked into the woods, with a very cat-like walk and a long, thick tail swinging behind it. There are some theories. Some people believe that the whole affair was made up. Mayor Fussell owned a Nickelodeon in town, and after about a week of the attacks, he rented a movie to show called The Big Cat, which of course was very popular at the time. He was the one that reported the information to the newspapers in the area, and the story blew up all around the country. I believe he is even quoted as saying there is no such thing as bad publicity. Two other well-known citizens in town that helped share the stories were Jeb Frink and Tater Shaw. Both of them owned gas stations in town, and having more people in the area would benefit their business. Others believed that it was a mad police dog gone rogue, or another German shepherd named Big Boy, but these theories were mostly dismissed at the time. There are a couple other canine theories, such as a wolf, which do not live in the area, or a coyote, but experts do not think the attacks were indicative of a canine predator. Most descriptions of the beast liken it to a mountain lion, aka cougar, aka puma. The sounds that it made and the size and description seem to match this explanation, along with the fact that the beast killed its victims quickly by biting its neck. There were rarely reports of any struggle, but here's the thing. Mountain lions haven't been spotted in North Carolina for over 100 years. In fact, in January of this year, eastern mountain lion was officially recorded to be extinct. But there have been eyewitnesses who have spotted cougars in the woods while hunting or riding their bikes at night. Many of these sightings have been reported in recent years. Most experts dismiss these sightings, but there's a big difference between a 40-pound bobcat, which are common here, and a 100-pound cougar. The Monster Quest episode also points to this explanation. I personally believe that a rare cougar was running loose through town. The paw print, the descriptions of the animal and the sounds that it made, and the quickness of the attacks all make me lean that way. Knowing that they tend to be skittish animals, so shy away from people, I believe that having so many hunters in the woods and swamps scared it deeper into the woods, which is why the attacks stopped. While I know that eastern cougars are supposed to exist anymore, I know what I saw was not a dog, and it was too large, and it had a long tail for it to be a bobcat. I also know hunters who have claimed to see them deep in the woods. But if it was all made up as a publicity stunt to bring people into Bladenboro, I find it ironic that the story has now come full circle. Bladenboro is a dying town without a lot of job pull. Once the tex mills started to go overseas, Bladenboro lost its biggest draw. 12 years ago, a group called Boost Borough was formed to help bring business and attention to the town. And they started their annual Bladenboro Beast Fest, using the beast as a way to bring tourists back to the town. And it's working. Last year, they claimed to have brought over 8,000 people from all over the country. So, what are your thoughts? An undocumented rogue cougar, a wild dog or wolf or coyote, or an overactive imagination in a small town? Well, my thought is Dogman. And I'll tell you why. Because the explanation or the description, that Larry gave us the other night with the face of the Dogman that he saw, yeah, he didn't see a tail, but he was too busy looking at its face and eyes. It could have had a tail. And I've seen artist renditions of the Beast of Bladenboro. Actually, I have one in my studio right now. And it resembles what Larry saw that night. So that's my view on the thing. I think it was a Dogman. What do you guys think? The last part of the upload is a subscriber's submission. Hey Jeff, I've been away for a while, but I love your Dogman channel. I had a very creepy encounter that seems to fit on creepypasta, except this was real. I'm in a country rock band from Arkansas. We'd been on the road for several weeks, gigging in Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and then back to Arkansas. Our last show was in a club near Gunnison, Mississippi. It was a medium-sized private club on the edge of some pretty thick woods on three sides. The owners had just added a new thick layer of gravel all around the parking area so no one would get stuck in that Mississippi mud. The club held about 300 people, and it was packed this night. We started playing at around 9 p.m., and we were scheduled to play until 1. People were drinking, laughing, dancing, and having a good time. About halfway through our first set, I noticed a woman standing in the corner near where I sat up. She seemed to be staring at me. Now, this is where it gets weird. I could see all the other people clearly, even in the dim lighting, but this woman was not clearly distinguishable. I could only get impressions of her. She appeared to be talking, around 6 feet or so. Very slender and wearing what appeared to be a formal gown. I remember thinking how overdressed she was. There were single guys all over the place hitting on women, but no one ever approached this woman or paid her any attention. Again, there was nothing clearly distinguishable about her, only impressions. I asked one of my bandmates what he thought about this weird chick staring me down. He looked where I mentioned and then asked, "What chick?" I quickly looked over and she was gone. As soon as my bandmate went back to what he was doing, she was back at her spot. I started to get bad vibes now. When I took a break, she was nowhere to be found and no one remembered seeing such a person. My bandmates started to look at me funny. This scenario went on for the entire show. When we finished our last song and set our instruments down, she was gone. I finally breathed a little easier. I packed my equipment up and took it out to the trailer. I remember how thick and noisy all the new gravel was. The only sound was mosquitoes humming and the frogs singing very loudly. As I unlocked the trailer to load my equipment, it got real quiet. No mosquitoes or frogs at all. I went into the trailer, placed my equipment down, and strapped it into place. As I turned around to leave the trailer, there she was, standing at the open door looking at me. I didn't hear her walk up the gravel. She was simply there. Trust me when I tell you, a rabbit couldn't move in the fresh gravel without making a noise. She didn't say a word, but held her hand out to me. I froze in place. I had the impression that her eyes were shining black. Her hair was black and about waist length. I didn't like my impression I had of her mouth either. Abnormally wide, kind of like the Joker. Again, this was all the impression I was getting. Finally, I heard the sound of gravel crunching and voices of my bandmates as they made their way to the trailer with their equipment. I glanced down for a second, then glanced back to the door and she was gone. No sound at all except for the crunching of my bandmates. The mosquitoes and frogs were now back. I didn't mention my experience to anyone, so they wouldn't think I had lost it. They asked if we should try to drive home or find a room for the night. I told them that I was not staying in the boondocks tonight. Not tonight. I'm heading back home to Little Rock as fast as I can go. I don't know if this fits your channel, but it happened to me recently, and it's true. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed today's upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. Definitely some interesting stuff going on there, huh? I want to thank everybody for your prayers for my dad. He had surgery this morning, and they are keeping him for, it was supposed to be a day surgery on his foot. When they went into his foot, they found that his foot was not getting any, or his toe area. There was no circulation of blood in his foot, and there was an infection. My dad's a stubborn guy, and a really nice guy, but just a stubborn, miserable man. Nice, miserable. Anyway, so he's going to have a, I can't even remember the name my mom told me, another surgery tomorrow on his foot to figure out what's going on. Apparently there's absolutely no circulation going on and whatnot. Now, this happened a couple of months ago, maybe 6 months ago, and he's been limping around and hobbling around. And about a month ago, 3 weeks ago, he thought his foot was broken, and I was like, "You've been walking on it all this time? What's wrong with you?" And it's not that he doesn't have insurance, it's just that he's stubborn. and a pain in my mother's ass. But anyway, so if you guys could just keep him in your prayers for a little bit longer, I'd really appreciate it. Thanks, and have a good night, guys.